The silence that took over the ballroom that Saturday afternoon wasn't the kind of silence that precedes happiness. It was the kind that freezes the blood in your veins, that makes the air seem too thick to breathe, that turns 200 guests into statues of flesh and bone, unable to process what they had just witnessed. The bride, Isabella Courtney, stood there at the altar, her French lace dress worth more than an entire apartment, but her face was completely disfigured by terror. Not the kind of fear that comes from a stumble or a moment of forgetfulness. It was the fear of someone who has just seen the past emerge from the shadows like a hungry creature, ready to devour every carefully constructed lie. On the other side of the hall, Beatrice, the 42-year-old housekeeper whom no one ever looked in the eye, held something in her arms that made millionaire Alexander Mercer's heart stop for 3 full seconds. It was his daughter, Marina, the 8-year-old girl who was supposedly receiving specialized treatment in another state. But Marina didn't look like she was in any treatment at all. She looked like she had survived a nightmare that no child should ever know. Her arms were too thin, the dark circles under her eyes too purple, her gaze too empty. And when she opened her mouth and spoke a single word, "Daddy," with a voice so broken it sounded like crushed glass, the entire hall understood that this wasn't a wedding. It was a public confession, a social execution, a trial being broadcast live. Isabella tried to say something, but her throat produced only a strangled sound. Her mother, Vivian Courtney, who until seconds ago wore the triumphant smile of someone who had finally conquered the fortune she always desired, was now retreating toward the side exit with stumbling steps. And Beatrice remained motionless, holding Marina with the firmness of someone who knew that letting go of that child would be allowing her to disappear again. But how did we get here? How did a housekeeper earning minimum wage manage to destroy the most anticipated wedding of the year? And why did no one, absolutely no one but her, realize that something horribly wrong was happening in that mansion? Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. We love to know. It all started 11 months earlier, when Isabella Courtney appeared in Alexander's life like a mirage too perfect to be real. She was 29, held a degree in architecture, came from a traditional family, and had a smile that made Alexander forget his wife had died just 14 months prior. Marina, traumatized by the loss of her mother, had become a difficult child. She cried at night, had constant nightmares, and refused to accept any woman near her father. Beatrice observed everything. She had worked at the mansion for 6 years, since before the first wife's death, and had known Marina since she was a baby. She saw the girl as the daughter she never had, having lost her own son in an accident years ago. And from the first day Isabella stepped into that house, something made the hair on Beatrice's spine stand up. It wasn't jealousy, it wasn't envy. It was instinct, the kind of instinct a mother develops when she senses danger near someone she loves. Isabella was kind to Alexander, always. But with Marina, she had a patience that seemed too forced, a smile that took half a second too long to appear, sweet words pronounced with a rigidity in her jaw that was almost imperceptible. And Beatrice noticed. She noticed everything. In the first few months, Alexander was blind with passion. He saw in Isabella the salvation for his loneliness and the chance to rebuild a family. When she suggested that Marina needed professional help because she was having severe behavioral episodes, he believed her. When she presented a private psychiatrist who recommended temporary commitment to a specialized clinic, he signed the papers. And when Isabella said it would be best for him not to visit his daughter for the first few weeks, to not disrupt the therapeutic process, he obeyed. Beatrice tried to question it. Once, she told Alexander that Marina didn't seem that troubled, that perhaps she just needed time. He looked at her with a mixture of irritation and condescension and replied, "You are not a doctor, Beatrice. Isabella wants what is best for Marina." And that was how the girl disappeared from the mansion, without proper goodbyes, without complete explanations, without a trace. Over the following months, Beatrice noticed subtle but devastating changes. Marina's room was emptied. Her photos were removed from the living room. Isabella began renovating the entire house, erasing any trace of the late wife and the absent daughter. And whenever Alexander asked about Marina, Isabella had ready answers. She is improving. The doctors say she needs more time. She asked not to receive visitors yet. She looked for the name of the clinic on the papers Isabella occasionally left on the table. She searched online. She called pretending to be a relative, and she discovered that this so-called specialized clinic had no record of Marina Mercer. None. That was when fear turned into panic. Where was Marina? What had Isabella done with that child? And why did Alexander, a man so intelligent and successful, not realize he was being manipulated? Beatrice knew she needed proof. She couldn't simply accuse the boss's future wife without concrete evidence, so she began to dig. She rummaged through the trash after everyone was asleep. She photographed documents left open. She listened to conversations through doors. And that was how she discovered the truth. The truth was hidden in a crumpled receipt at the bottom of Vivian Courtney's purse, Isabella's mother. Beatrice found it while cleaning the guest room where Vivian had been staying since she started helping with the wedding preparations. The paper was stained with coffee, but the words were legible. St. Rita's boarding house. Monthly payment regarding minor MM, 300 $. She photographed the document with her old phone, erased any trace that she had touched the purse, and spent the rest of the day feigning normality while her heart beat like a war drum. That night, after everyone slept, she searched for St. Rita's boarding house and found an address 30 miles away, in a small town called Silent Valley. The few online reviews described the place as simple, isolated, and discreet, a euphemism for abandoned. The following Sunday, her day off, Beatrice took 2 buses and a van to get there. St. Rita's boarding house was exactly the kind of building you forget 5 minutes after looking at it. Peeling walls, windows with rusted bars, a garden that had given up on being a garden years ago. A faded sign swung at the entrance, long-term lodging. Family, I need to see how she is. The lie burned in Beatrice's throat, but it was necessary. We don't receive visitors without authorization from the legal guardian. The woman started to close the door. Beatrice jammed her foot in the gap. Please, I just want to know if she's okay. 5 minutes. She pulled a $50 bill from her purse, half of what she had to get through the week. I just want to see her from afar. Beatrice followed the woman to a side door that opened onto a dirt backyard surrounded by high walls, and that was where she saw her. Marina was sitting alone under a leafless tree. She was wearing clothes that were old and too big. Her hair was unkempt and dull, and she was rocking back and forth with a mechanical, repetitive, disturbing motion, as if she were trying to rock herself to sleep, as if she had forgotten that someone should be doing that for her. Beatrice felt something shatter inside her chest. Marina! She whispered the name, unable to raise her voice. The girl lifted her head slowly, as if the movement required immense effort. When her eyes met Beatrice's, there was a flash of recognition, followed by something that looked like hope being crushed by fear. B? The voice was a thread. Beatrice crossed the yard in 4 strides and knelt in front of the girl. Up close, the situation was even worse. Marina was thinner, much thinner. She had sores on her arms. Her lips were cracked, and her eyes had that opacity of someone who has given up asking for help. My God, Marina, what did they do to you? Beatrice held the girl's face with both hands, feeling her cheeks sunken in too deep. Isabella said, I needed to stay here because I'm bad, because I don't accept her, because I make Daddy suffer. Marina spoke with the monotonous voice of someone who had repeated these words so many times they had become the truth. She said if I tell anyone, they'll put me in a worse place, that Daddy doesn't want me anymore, that I am the problem. And it will be worse, she cried in silence, her hands covering her face, while passengers averted their gaze with the awkwardness typical of strangers who don't know whether or not to offer comfort. She had found Marina, but finding her wasn't enough. She needed to prove what was happening. She needed to make Alexander see, and she needed to do it before it was too late, because the wedding was set for 3 months from now. And Beatrice was absolutely certain that as soon as Isabella officially became Alexander's wife and Marina's legal stepmother, the girl would disappear for good, not into a boarding house, but in a much more permanent way. People like Isabella didn't leave loose ends. Over the following weeks, Beatrice lived a double life. By day, she cleaned the house, ironed clothes, prepared meals, and pretended to know nothing. By night, she planned. She tried to talk to Alexander twice. The first time, he was too busy to listen. The second time, Isabella appeared in the middle of the conversation with that sharp smile and asked, "Is there a problem, Beatrice?" In a tone that wasn't a question, it was a threat. Beatrice realized she needed something irrefutable, something Alexander couldn't ignore or rationalize. So she made the riskiest decision of her life. On the day of the wedding, she wouldn't be cleaning. She would be bringing Marina back. The Saturday of the wedding dawned with an obscenely blue sky, the kind of perfect day that seems to mock any human tragedy. Beatrice woke up at 4:30 a.m., her heart already racing before she even opened her eyes. She had spent the previous night on the floor of the tiny room she occupied at the back of the mansion, unable to lie on the bed, mentally reviewing every step of what she was about to do. The plan was simple, but desperate. She would take a taxi to Silent Valley during the morning, while everyone was busy with final preparations. She would take Marina out of the boarding house, by force, if necessary, and she would return in time for the ceremony, which would start at 4 p.m. Then, at the exact moment the officiant asked if anyone had any objection to the union, she would present Marina, in front of everyone. In front of the family, the friends, Alexander's business partners, the social press covering the wedding of the year. Isabella could lie to Alexander in private, but she wouldn't be able to lie to 200 witnesses staring at the deplorable state of a child who should have been cared for. At 5 a.m., Beatrice slipped out the back door. She had saved up for weeks to pay for the taxi, $150 round trip, more than she earned in a whole week. The driver, a man of about 65 named Oswald, noticed the tension in her body. "Everything all right, miss?" The same woman with the bun answered the door, but this time her face showed genuine surprise. "You again. I said that has a name. It's called kidnapping. And when the police come, I'm going to say you broke in." "EB? You promise?" But there was no way to hide the arms that were too thin, the sunken dark circles, the traumatized look. In truth, Beatrice didn't want to hide it. She wanted everyone to see. She wanted the truth to be impossible to ignore. They arrived at the mansion at 2:40 p.m. The ceremony would begin in 1 hour and 20 minutes. The place was already in total uproar. Florists running from one side to the other, photographers adjusting equipment, waiters organizing crystal glasses. No one noticed when Beatrice entered through the side of the garden, with Marina hidden under a blanket. She took the girl to her room at the back of the house. "You need to stay here quietly until I call you, okay?" Beatrice held Marina's shoulders, looking straight into her eyes. "When the time comes, we're going out front, where everyone is, and you're going to see your father. He will believe you." Beatrice prayed that this was true, because you are here, and the truth is on your face, on your body, in every word you say. At 4:12 p.m. sharp, the music began. Alexander entered and took his place at the altar set up in the garden, surrounded by arrangements of white flowers that cost more than Beatrice would earn in a year. He was nervous, but happy. He adjusted his tie every 10 seconds, smiled at the guests, wiped his sweaty hands on his suit. A man about to start over. A man who had no idea he was being destroyed from the inside out. Then Isabella appeared, and Beatrice had to admit she looked perfect. The lace dress was a work of art, her hair pulled back in an elegant bun with small flowers intertwined, light makeup enhancing her blue eyes, the confident smile of someone who has just won a long and complicated game. Vivian Courtney walked beside her daughter, equally radiant, holding Isabella's arm with the pride of an owner. The two exchanged a quick, conspiratorial glance that said everything. We did it. The ceremony began. The officiant spoke about love, commitment, union. Beautiful words that rang hollow when you knew the truth. Beatrice stood at the back of the venue, her heart beating so hard she could feel the pulse in her neck, in her temples, in her wrists. If anyone present knows of any impediment why this union should not take place, speak now or forever hold your peace. The officiant's voice echoed through the garden with the solemnity of a decree. It was at that moment that Beatrice moved. She walked to the back room where Marina was waiting, took the girl's cold hand and whispered, "It's time." Marina trembled, but she didn't pull back. Together, they crossed the side corridor that led to the garden. Beatrice didn't run. She walked slowly, deliberately, with Marina by her side. Every step was a sentence. Every second that passed was Isabella's patience running out. When people started to notice the movement on the side of the garden, whispers spread like wildfire in dry straw. "Who is that?" He was looking at Beatrice with a mixture of confusion and rising irritation. "Beatrice, what are you doing? This is not the moment." His face went from annoyed to confused to shocked in less than 3 seconds. "Marina," his voice came out strangled. The girl looked at her father, and something broke inside her. All the weeks of pain, loneliness, abandonment, fear, it all came to the surface at once. "Daddy!" She began to cry, not the silent, contained crying of someone who has learned not to make noise, but deep, desperate sobs. "Daddy, I thought you didn't want me anymore." His eyes scanned every inch of his daughter, the arms that were too thin, the old clothes, the haggard face, the purple circles under her eyes. My God, Marina." He fell to his knees on the grass and pulled the girl into a hug so tight it seemed he wanted to fuse their two bodies into one. "Where were you? Where were you?" "That I ruined everything. This is a misunderstanding. Mr. Mercer, you need to understand that Marina was a difficult child, and my daughter only tried. You photographed it, but you forgot the original." He squeezed Marina tighter against himself. "I hired a private investigator. He handed me the full report last night. Photos, documents, testimonies, everything. If I simply cancelled the wedding, Isabella could claim it was a misunderstanding, that Marina was being treated properly, that I was being irrational." He looked around at the 200 people frozen in shock. "But now everyone knows. There is no way to lie when there are 200 witnesses. They're going to arrest you for kidnapping, false imprisonment, abuse, and whatever else the lawyers managed to add." The police sirens could already be heard in the distance. Alexander knelt again in front of Marina, wiping the tears from her face with his thumbs. "Forgive me, my daughter. Forgive me for not realizing sooner, for believing her, for letting this happen." His own voice cracked. "I never stopped loving you, not for a second, and I will never let anyone hurt you again. B said you would come back." Vivian wept, begging for clemency that would not come. And in the middle of the chaos, Alexander carried Marina in his arms toward the house, whispering promises of safety into her ear. Beatrice stayed behind, watching. Her work was done. The months that followed were months of rebuilding. Marina went through intensive psychological counseling 3 times a week with a therapist specializing in childhood trauma. The nightmares gradually decreased. The weight returned little by little. The shine in her green eyes began to reappear, shy at first, but growing stronger. Alexander never worked late again. He never missed a meal with his daughter. He never blindly trusted anyone again when it came to Marina. Guilt haunted him in the early hours, waking up sweating, dreaming of all the ways he could have lost his daughter forever. But by day, he focused on being present, on regaining the trust that had been broken. The trial of Isabella and Vivian was swift and devastating. With 200 witnesses, a video-recorded confession, and documentary evidence provided by the private investigator, there was no possible defense. Isabella was sentenced to 12 years in prison for aggravated kidnapping, false imprisonment, abuse, and attempted misappropriation of inheritance. It was discovered she had altered Alexander's will without authorization. Vivian got 8 years as an accomplice. Neither was granted the right to appeal in freedom. The owner of St. Rita's boarding house was also indicted, and the establishment closed. Investigations revealed that 3 other children had been kept there in similar conditions in recent years. The case became national news. TV shows debated signs of abuse that go unnoticed. Laws were proposed for greater oversight of private institutions housing children. But for Beatrice, none of that mattered as much as seeing Marina smile again. 3 months after the wedding that never happened, Alexander called Beatrice for a talk. She expected to be fired. After all, she had invaded her boss's privacy, rifled through his belongings, acted behind his back. Instead, he pushed an envelope across the table. "What is this?" she asked, hesitant. "Open it." "When I failed as a father, you were there." He took a deep breath. "This house is yours. No debts, no conditions. And I want you to continue working here, but not as a housekeeper, as the house manager, with a dignified salary and full benefits. I owe you more than I can repay, stronger than Isabella ever imagined. It's about who stays when everything falls apart. It's about who fights for you when it would be easier to look away. And sometimes, family is a housekeeper who risked everything to save a child no one else could see.